Hello, everybody, and we're back with. I don't think this is going to be the last one of the year, but it is an episode nonetheless. I think it's 127 or 128. I think it's 127, episode 127. And this will be the Christmas episode. Now, for them of you, wherever you are around the world, good luck to you. As you've probably guessed, I'm not a Christmas fan. And I know a lot of you are. A lot of you go fucking bananas over Christmas, spending bag loads of money on your kids because you've not been there through year. But I'm not one of them. I'm not one of them fuckers. Christmas to me is something that you get out at way and get back to it as quick as possible. Now, I'm speaking to a lot of people who are expats on this podcast, and they'll give you the excuse, oh, yeah, I moved away because of the weather, because I was sick of where I lived, better job opportunities. But I bet you a penny to a pinch of shit, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, fucking Christmas. I'm far away enough that I never have to celebrate Christmas with family again. Now, have I moved to Japan because they don't celebrate Christmas here? Perhaps. But I will give you just a few stories in this episode about my Christmases when I were coming up, and I'll let you decide whether I come from a garbage family or not. So here are just a few Christmas tales for you to listen to while you sat around the Christmas table. Now, I listened to Diary of a CEO podcast. It's a really, really good podcast. And they had Boobly on other day. I was listening to it yesterday, and I picked out this little snippet that he come out with. And I'm just going to let you listen to it now.
Was an epiphany moment for me where I was sitting in the hospital room and I was like, oh my God, I am now synonymous with this beautiful time of year where people don't treat each other like assholes. And there's kindness and goodness, and I get to be a part of this. And then people invite me into their homes at a time that is everything to them, and their connection with the people they love and their memories. And then I started getting deeper, and I was like, oh my God, the people aren't going to remember shit when I die. They're not going to remember home or the duet or this.
Yeah, nice work, Boobly. Now, there's a fucking man who's never spent Christmas in the north of England. There's a man who has not sat round in a living room as a kid just watching resentment bubble up. Just like you're making yourself a curry at home and you're watching for pot to boil so you can switch the heat down. Yeah, this 7-year-old me sat in a living room with your aunties or something like that, and the resentment of the year of what your mother or what some other auntie has said in February of that same year. And as the booze goes down and you can feel the resentment bubbling up, and then around 8 or 9 o'clock, boom, it comes flooding out like a gush of shit. And it kicks off. There's tears. The fucking uncles and the dads are getting in there, separating them. Now, one of the good things about my mother's side of family was they used to throw down as much booze as quickly as possible, that either one or two of them would throw up first before all this argument started. So it were always a delicate balance of, am I going to get, or are they going to get too pissed to remember what they're annoyed about and pass out? Or are they going to get too pissed that they're going to throw up on themselves? or are they going to drink steadily but surely, get all the shit out because they think it's a good idea to air the grievances, and then get ushered out of the door, and then suddenly you're flying down Ring Road in Bradford with your dad's pissed up, your mum's crying because somebody said something a bit off colour to her, and you're on your way home. So it were a delicate balance. Are you going to be sleeping at your auntie's house tonight, or are you going to be getting driven home by your dad who was 3 sheets at fucking wind? That were Christmas to me. Not the boobly Christmas. Not the Christmas that Boobly's describing, where this one part of the year where everybody's been nice to each other. The northern Christmas is flipped, especially where I come from and the family I came from. It's all about throwing booze down your neck and getting as pissed up as quickly as possible to forget about how shite people's lives were. Now, I'm not wanting any sympathy from anybody at all, because this is just how Christmas was where we were. And I will guarantee you a penny to a pinch of shit. All the kids I went to school with were, I would say, 50% of them were having a far worse Christmas than I were. A far worse Christmas than I were. So here are a few of the hits from my Christmases over the years. And I will go back to, it must have been Christmas. So if I were 11, it was Christmas 1982. We just won Falklands War, and I was 11. Now, the thing with my family was there were 13 grandkids. 13 grandkids, and I were the youngest. So if I'd have been 12, my oldest cousin was 32. So there were a massive gap. I had nothing in common with him. I don't think I've had a conversation with him. My entire life, I've never had a conversation with my eldest cousin. So I was sort of bordering on, I was closer in age to the great grandkids than I was to the grandkids when we're talking about from my grandma's point of view. So I was the youngest of the grandkids, and yeah, so I was sort of bundled in with great grandkids, and the great grandkids, I think the closest one to me were 5 years younger, which is huge when you're 12. But I were bundled in with them lot. So all my cousins were of drinking age. So Christmas Day night, we're up in fucking Queensbury, bordering on Keighley. So we're up on moors, and it's cold and it's snowy, and we're all up there at my cousin's house. And then all of a sudden, it gets to about 5 o'clock, and it's like, right, Darren, we're off to the pub. Oh, great. No, you stay here and do babysitting. And they went. So I'm fucking there, twiddling my thumbs with these 8-year-olds. What the fuck am I supposed to do? So I just left with these 8-year-olds. I just watch the telly, do whatever you fucking want. I'm not taking any responsibility for you. So there's a fucking 5 kilo box of Quality Street, and I'm just in there with toffee fingers and coconuts. And by the time everybody got back, there's only them golden pennies left, because I was throwing out the golden pennies to great grandkids. Let them pull your fucking fillings out. I've got this soft toffee stuff. Anyway, they come back pissed up. It turns out there'd been a fella in pub in a kilt. In a kilt. And my mother had been a bit pissed up, and she'd gone, "Hey, you got out under your kilt." And apparently his fucking nuts had just sat in her hand. And that was the topic of conversation when everybody came back, with the fact that my mum had had somebody else's balls in her hand. Unbelievable. Anyway, they came back. All right, Darren, you've done your job. The kids are still alive. Well done. We're going to carry on as drinking. Get to bed. I'm like, what? What? So I'm bundled off to bed with these great grandkids, and you're hearing all these noises going on downstairs. People are having a good time. The drinking's going off. Anyway, I must have. Well, obviously, I fell asleep. Now, when you wake up from something like that, when you wake up after somebody's had a party and you're a kid, people know this. You know, your parents are having a party, the friends around or the family's around. They don't want you about, so it's like, fuck off to bed. We're going to carry on the drinking. So you're up in bed and you hear these muffled noises from downstairs and people stumbling at the toilet, and you fall off to sleep. And then you're usually the first one to wake up in the morning. And it were about that, because there were no central heating back there, so it was a bit cold. So I wake up and I don't know how many people he must have had in his house that night, my cousin. But I woke up and there were me and other great grandkids in one of the bedrooms. And I opened the door, and the first thing I saw were my cousin's wife's sister just laid out on landing. Just laid out on the landing, bucket at side of her. Now the bucket were full of sick. This was the first person I saw, Boxing Day, 1982. This was the first person I saw. Oh Christ! I opened the door and she looked up at me as if she'd been injured in World War One, and she just looked at me. She opened her eyes and went, "Oh!" And I stepped over and I looked in bucket. And I remember she'd been getting into gin that night. She'd been on Gordon's. She was supping gin and tonics all night. And I looked in bucket and it were full of sick, but there were a full slice of lemon. I can see it as clear as day. And it were 40 odd year ago. And there were a full slice of lemon in this sick bucket. And I thought to myself, she's been so pissed that she's necked that lemon. She's swallowed the entire slice of lemon. She's carried on drinking all night. She's passed out on landing. Somebody's put a bucket at the side of her. And she's thrown up that full slice of lemon. Anyway, I'm stepping over bodies. Like a fucking zombie movie. I'm stepping over bodies to the toilet. I go into the toilet, I have a piss. And I'm thinking, where's my parents? Where are my mum and dad? So I look, as I come out of the toilet, I look further down landing. My cousin, who'd got a broken leg at the time, were on landing. His brother had got in his bed, pissed up, and he were too disabled because of his broken leg. He were unable to get him out of his bed because his brother were pissed. So he'd had to sleep on landing on Christmas Day fucking night with a broken leg. My cousin had to sleep on landing because his brother had passed out in his bed. So you've got to remember, this is 7:30, 7:00, 7:30 in the morning. So I walk down the stairs. There's at least 2 or 3 people asleep on the stairs. Bottom at stairs, and then you turn right into the living room. There were a person asleep in that little square bit front door. Go into the living room, and you don't know what to expect. And I pushed the door open, and it had only opened about a quarter of the way because there was somebody behind the door. So I pushed the door open. Oh, the fuck! That's what you get. And then I walked in, and my mum and dad are asleep in front of the fire. And then there were a living room to the back. And I were hungry. And I saw the fucking box of Quality Street that I had murdered that night. There were a bit that I thought, do I dive in for some chocolate, or do I go and get myself some breakfast? and there were just bodies everywhere. There were bodies, and it smelled of stale beer and sick. Stale beer and sick. I walked over to the kitchen, and in the kitchen there were a couple of family members just smoking cigarettes. And I was the first person to get up, and they said to me, "What do you want for breakfast?" Oh, thank God, they made me breakfast. Now it turned out they'd not even been to bed yet. They were the last two standing. The last two standing. So they got me some breakfast on, and then it turns out there was two pissed. They said, "Look, you're gonna have to finish it yourself, Dan. You're just gonna have to finish it yourself." And they went into the living room. So I'm making myself some beans on toast. Made the beans on toast. Went back into the living room. By the time 2 minutes later, I'd gone into the living room. They'd fallen asleep with cigs in their hand. The cig had dropped onto the sofa, and it would just gently burning the sofa away in between the legs. So what I had to do was go back into the kitchen, get the water, pour it on the sofa, and throw the cig in the sink. And then I sat down at the dining room table and slowly ate my breakfast of beans on toast with a cup of tea. Looking around, surveying everything in front of me, the carnage. And it were a good, I would say, hour before people started stirring. Now, when you're a kid growing up in North, you're gently ushered to the side while the parents get about their drinking. And because there were no internet then, you had 4 channels on telly. So the only form of entertainment really that you had were your telly. And if people were drinking in the living room, you had no fucking chance of watching 3, 2, 1 a game for a laugh. Or give us a clue. You know, you were not hearing any of that over the din of 30-somethings getting shat-faced. So I just put telly on, and then people started to stir. But when they're waking up from an heavy one, that you've got at least 2 or 3 hours before you're getting back home. So I put the telly on, I turned it up, and my dad started to stir. And I knew once my dad were up, my dad wouldn't be standing for any of this, and we'd be off. And that's what I did. So my dad woke up, and then I would say within an hour, we're back on road and we're going home. Christmas 1982, people. Christmas 1982. And we're back. I've just had to put heating on. You know, these houses in Japan, they don't keep the heat well at all. I've got an air conditioner on there that's blowing heat out now, and I'm just starting to warm up. So that's where I went just then. Now, there are times in a kid's life when they find out that stuff ain't true. You know, Tooth Fairy, Santa, shit like that. Now, mine was Christmas. So what would I have been? Christmas 1979. We were living in Wyke in Bradford. For them that you don't know, Wyke, it's not in the countryside, but it's surrounded by fields, and it's in the south of Bradford. Now, we lived in this big terraced house and didn't have central heating back then. Not many people had central heating back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. So, and it sounds almost like a Dickensian Christmas in Victorian England. So this was before anybody had continental quilts. So you were still going to bed with sheets and blankets. And in winter, your mother would just throw on more blankets. few coats, shit like that. And you'd be waking up in the morning and your whole window would be iced up. We'd had this little row of sponges at bottom at window to catch all condensation, so it didn't go mouldy. But because it was so cold, all that had ice up, and windows had ice up, and you were like scraping a windscreen of your car to see outside first thing in the morning because it was that cold. When you think back now, and then I remember we moved house in 82, and we moved into this house that had central heating. I remember in winter just thinking, oh, this is the height of luxury. Because when we were at Daleston Terrace, fucking Jesus Christ, see your breath as soon as you woke up in the morning. You'd just, and you could see your breath. And you'd have to go downstairs and put fire on. Because the living room was the only warm room in the house. Yeah, I remember that vividly. Anyway, Christmas Day, 1979. We'd just moved house. I think we'd moved house. No, we hadn't. We'd been in a year, but we did move house in December, maybe 77. So we'd been in the house a couple of years. And because it was Christmas, excited. There wasn't much excitement in a kid in the north of England. So Christmas were the pinnacle. So I'd always wake up in the middle of night, every night, but then you'd go back to sleep. But it was Christmas. So I woke up and it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. Oh, fuck, it's Christmas. It's Christmas. Straight downstairs. I thought, this is going to be great. Mum and Dad are still in bed. Open the door. There are 0 presents under the tree. And you've got to remember this, our 8-year-old, so we're just on the cusp of finding out that Santa wasn't real. So, like, what the fuck? He's not been? Santa's not been? And I'm like, this can't be right. This can't be right. So I thought, all right, he mustn't have been yet. I'll probably catch him when he turns up with my presents. So I put telly on, and I mean, compared to now, it were rubbish. But Christmas telly were always fantastic. It was the only time your dad would buy TV Times and Radio Times. Radio Times had all programmes that were going to be on BBC, TV Times, ITV Channel 4. So you'd open it up for Christmas Day, and it was 6 o'clock in the morning, so you could find out what were good on telly. It seemed like, I don't know, it just seemed like your dad had spent a lot of brass just for you to find out what were going to be on telly. Yes, kids, it were 2 magazines that were bought so you could flick through the pages and find out what were going to be on all the telly. BBC One, BBC Two, you'd go to Radio Times, ITV and Channel 4, TV Times. Nobody ever thought to put them all in one magazine for the Christmas period. That never dawned on anybody. So I opened it up and there was some decent stuff on. I thought, right, I'll leave it till about 7:30 and I'll go upstairs and I'll give my mum and dad a nudge to say Santa's not been. So I don't know what we're on. I can't remember. Herbie's Gone Bananas or something like that. So I thought I'll watch this and then I'll go upstairs because it's still dark outside. The north of England don't get light in middle of December until about fucking 10 o'clock in the morning. So I'm watching some decent children's TV, And then, yeah, it starts getting light about 8 o'clock. So sun's come up. It must have been a good film because it took away from the fact that I had no presents to open. I thought I'd been put on naughty list. So I go to front window and I'm seeing my mates out there on the bikes, on new BMXs going up and down road in snow. I thought it's fucking 8 o'clock. It's 8 o'clock now. Where are my presents? So I go upstairs, open door, and your mum and dad are just there going, because they'd obviously been drinking night before. And I don't want to make them sound out to be complete alcoholics, but that's what everybody did. Your parents went and got blind drunk with other parents on Christmas Eve. It was Christmas. They've got a couple of weeks off of work. And it's what I did later on in life before my kids were born. People are happy that they don't have to be at work for a couple of weeks, so they go and get pissed. It's what folk do, or it's what folk did back then. So I said to my mum, Santa's not been. Oh, all right. Give us a minute. So back downstairs, I give it another half an hour. Sun's up now. Still no presents. 8:30. Now, 8:30 on Christmas Day morning, it might as well be afternoon. You've been looking forward to ripping at those fucking that Christmas paper since about November. No presents. For fuck's sake. So then you've got yourself dressed. You've gone outside. You've seen your mate with blue lips who had all in art going up and down road on his BMX. You've gone out, had a chat with him. What did you get? No fucking idea what I've got. The presents, they're not, Santa not been yet. Nope, I've not got out yet. Oh, well, that's not on. So I go back in. It's now bordering on 9 o'clock. So I go to my dad. Dad, Santa's not been. All right. So my dad gets up. My mum hears my dad stirring. So dressing gown goes on. Get out of the room, Darren. I'm going to get my dressing gown on. So dressing gown goes on. And then they come out. I says, he's not been. Santa's not been. And my dad, thinking on his feet, he said, do you know what I think he's done, Darren? I think he's probably left him in attic. He's probably come here last. And he didn't have a chance to take him down to living room. So let me go and have a look upstairs. Obviously, is where he's been hiding him for the last few weeks. So the ladders are brought down. My mum comes out and she's, ugh. So she goes up. She goes up to attic. Now my dad's still playing on the fact that, right, how can we salvage this? We don't want to ruin Santa for him. So my dad's already said to me, yep, he's probably left him up in attic, Darren. You know, he's had a bit of a job on. My mum walks past me. He don't believe in Santa anymore. Just get him down. Get his bloody presents down. And my mum is up there just throwing the presents down, absent-mindedly throwing the presents down. I didn't have a chance to catch half of them. So the presents are thrown down to me. And nothing... I've just finding out that Santa doesn't exist as you're looking up at your mother throwing presents down at you, and then you catch a glimpse of a growler. Nothing says Santa doesn't exist anymore than that. Yeah. Merry Christmas, Darren. Santa doesn't exist. And, you know, get dressed, mother. Get dressed. And then you go downstairs. You had to make a couple of trips because I did quite well that Christmas. And you go downstairs, and the aunts, who were knobheads anyway, you open up your presents. You get the presents that you want from your mum and dad and your nan. You're like, fucking hell, this is great. And then you get them side presents, them shit ones that, you know, the aunts and Uncle Knobhead have gone into somewhere, Carter's in Bradford, and bought you somewhere. Fucking get him that and let's get home. Board games. Fucking board games. Now, I know kids don't get board games anymore now, but they should be spelt, board games back then should have been spelt BORED. Now, just fucking think about it, will you? You're giving your nephew, who is an only child, a fucking board game. And you look on the board game and it's for 2 or more players. Who am I going to fucking play with? Who am I going to play with? What is an only child going to do with a fucking board game? There's nobody to play with. Nobody to play with. Kids weren't allowed in house, for fuck's sake. So who are we going to play a board game with? And I remember this shit board game, Sportac. Sportac, I think, were an Eastern European track and field game, which they must have picked up for 50 fucking pence in some shop. And I remember reading through instructions, and some title instructions. You know, when you see the letter D and you've got that little space in the D, that little circle, that had been coloured in, and all the P's and the E's and the D's, they'd all been coloured in. So I think it was fucking second hand. Fucking Margaret and Bernard Wilson, the tightest fuckers that have ever walked the face of this earth, had bought their nephew, who is an only child, a fucking Eastern European second-hand board game. And following year, they bought me Mastermind. I don't know if you remember Mastermind. It had this fucking Southeast Asian woman on thing. They bought me Mastermind, another fucking board game that you can't play by yourself. I don't know if they were taking piss, or if they knew that I didn't know they were taking the piss, because I didn't know they were taking the fucking piss, because it's a fucking board game for 2 or more players. So you can't play this fucking game with one person. 2 years running, they bought me fucking board games. I'm not bitter. I don't carry it with me over 40 years later. Yeah. So that was the year I found out Santa doesn't exist, as I look up at my mother throwing Christmas presents down at me. Oh, it's too old enough for Santa anyway. Well, all right. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Darren. Now, those were the 2 Christmases that I would say best describe a Northern Christmas. Now, fast forward to Christmas 2019, which couldn't be one of my best ever Christmas. My best ever Christmas. I've given you the shit, and now I'll give you my best Christmas. I'd just done a week. Me and the lad had just done a week in northern Thailand. We'd flown down on Christmas Eve to Phuket, and me and Jean had stayed in the airport hotel at Phuket Airport. Christmas Day, my daughter and my wife were flying in from Tokyo. My daughter was still at school, my lad were in kindergarten. That's why I could have taken him out of school. I'm waiting in arrivals in Phuket Airport. My wife and my daughter, Christmas Day morning, in the come. The first time my daughter had been in Thailand, the first time my wife had been in the south of Thailand. I'd spent a lot of time in the south of Thailand in many trips I'd been there before. The turn up. They come back to the hotel, they both get a shower. I go outside, I find myself a taxi. It's Christmas Day morning. We have something to eat at a vendor, Christmas breakfast, Thai noodles, pad Thai, just from a vendor. It costs nothing. The greatest Christmas breakfast. We then jump in a taxi. I'd hired a villa for a week. For the week between Christmas and New Year, I'd hired a villa in Onang. Yeah. Onang is it were a tiny little place when I first went there, but it kind of grown. And we got there, and there's the private villa. We had his own private pool and this big steel gate that we could just shut the world away from. And I remember we got there, we got let in, and the fella left. He were an American bloke, and the fella left, and the kids just stripped off bolloco. And I was sat there outside the villa with my wife, and we were just watching the kids jumping in and out of the pool. Christmas Day afternoon. And I thought, this is the best Christmas I've ever had. And I thought back to those 2 Christmases I'd just described to you, and thought, yeah, all that shit. All those shit, cold, wet, alcohol-fueled, argumentative, hate-filled Christmas that Boobler was describing the opposite to, that you heard earlier on in podcast. All that just fucking melts away when you see the kids jumping in and out of a swimming pool. And it was naught to do with Christmas. We had nothing Christmassy going on. We'd bought each other no presents. We listened to no Christmas songs. There were a little Christmas tree in corner main living room at Villa, but that were as Christmassy as it got. And then the kids had tired themselves out. Late afternoon, there were a little joint at the top of the road because we were out in this palm tree forest. There were no round us, really. We didn't have to go into the centre of town. So around 5 o'clock, we went up to Endett Road, and there was Thai family. It wasn't even a restaurant. It was just this stand-to place. And we had the best Thai food we'd had that entire holiday in that place. And then at night, we walked into town and we got a pad Thai and some milkshakes for the kids and just walked around the night market. They were the best Christmas day I've ever had in my life. And it were just before COVID it. Just before COVID it. So we haven't been away since. But to have that Christmas day to what I were normally used to, and I remember my wife said to me, look at them. Look at the Christmas, look at this holiday that they're having, because she'd never had an holiday like that as a kid, and I fucking certainly haven't over Christmas, because we always had to stay at home at Christmas because my mother, I've got to spend time with family. And it was the same every year, just naught but trouble and sniping and shite. And then when you get rid of all that stuff, because they've all died now, so even if I did spend Christmas at home now, it'd be different because my family are here now. So Christmas is different here. It's not celebrated here. It's a normal working day. I think Christmas Day is on a Monday here. So it's a normal working day. But Boxing Day, we're on train up to airport and then we're away to warmer climes from the 27th onwards. And then we'll be back in New Year. So Christmas for me now is getting the kids all bundled up on an aeroplane and off to somewhere warmer. I don't like spending Christmas and New Year when it's in the cold. Fuck that. Get yourself warmed up, and then that heat that you've stored internally on your winter holiday will fucking tide you over to March when it starts to really warm up here. So for all of them, wherever you are, your expats, I know why you've fucked off. For all them that are still in Bradford or wherever you are in those northern cities surrounded by families who are about to kick off, you're on that hair trigger. Good luck to you. Bite your tongue. Just fucking bite your tongue. You'll be right. And the next podcast I will do, I'll surprise you. Fuck it. I'm not telling you now. I'll tell you when I'm there. So I'll see you. So for them of you round that Christmas table, just deal with it. I'm feeling you. I'm feeling you. And I'll see you all somewhere warmer in that twilight zone between Christmas and New Year. See you soon. Adios.